I hear it all the time. Someone sees an act of cruelty or maybe some political hypocrisy, and they call it disgusting.
Right.
It's such a powerful word, it's so visceral. But when you say that, are you actually feeling the same gut-churning thing you'd feel if you saw, I don't know, spoiled food?
And that is the absolute core of what we're diving into today, because disgust, at its root, it's arguably our most fundamental evolutionary emotion.
It's about survival.
It's purely about survival. You see something like blood or vomit, and your brain just screams, avoid.
Yeah.
It's a hardwired signal to stay away from contamination.
Okay, so that's the stuff nobody argues with. That's physical disgust.
Yeah.
Or core disgust.
Exactly.
So the mission for this deep dive, which is based on a really comprehensive systematic review of the research, is to figure out if moral disgust, the feeling you get from betrayal or corruption, is its own separate emotion with its own, its own signature in the body and brain.
Or is it just a metaphor? Are we just borrowing that old contamination response because it feels sort of similar?
Right. Is it the same thing, or are we just using the same word?
And to figure that out, we're going to look at the hard data. We're talking facial muscle responses, changes in the nervous system, brain scans.
We're going to see if the body treats a liar the same way it treats a carton of spoiled milk.
That's the plan.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. Let's unpack what scientists, people like Paul Rozin, would call core disgust.
Right. So this has really clear markers. There's that unmistakable facial expression.
Yeah.
The nose wrinkle, the lip curl.
The you face.
The you face, exactly. And a very strong impulse to just get away from the thing. Immediate avoidance.
But it's not just about, moving away from a rat in the alley. The science shows a direct link to our moral systems, which is where it starts to get weird.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah. Because research has shown pretty consistently that our physical state connects directly to our moral judgments.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So take hunger. There are studies that show if you are significantly hungry, your moral condemnation of something actually goes down.
Wait, really?
Yeah. You're just less likely to judge someone's actions as severely wrong if your body is in a state of deficit.
So if I want to be a better person, a less judgmental person, I should have a sandwich first.
It's not a bad strategy. And the reason why is fascinating. It actually mirrors what happens with physical disgust.
How so?
Well, being hungry also reduces your facial disgust response to physically gross images. The theory is that the physiological resources you need for that intense avoidance.
For both kinds of avoidance.
For both. Avoiding bad food and avoiding bad people. It seems to draw on a common underlying system. When your resources are low, that system is just less active.
Which points to this shared function at the core of it all, which is just avoidance.
Exactly.
Physical disgust makes you back away from the contaminant. So moral disgust, the idea is, makes you back away from what? Social contaminants.
Social contaminants, yeah. People who break the rules, who threaten the group. It's about protecting your social standing, your reputation.
And this ties into moral foundations theory, right?
Yeah.
MFT.
It does, yeah. MFT basically suggests that our moral systems evolve to suppress selfishness so we can all cooperate. And moral disgust is a huge trigger when those foundations get violated.
Especially the purity foundation.
Just really purity, that's the big one.
And purity violations are the ones most likely to have, actual physical disgust cues mixed in. Like I think one of the studies describes someone searching through trash.
Right. So you've got the physical grossness of the trash, but also the social taboo.
Which is why the whole debate exists. Is the disgust really about the immoral act? Or is it just because the immoral act is happening near garbage?
That's the million-dollar question. And a lot of people argue that what we call moral disgust is really just anger. You're angry at the injustice. You just use the word disgusting because it feels dirty.
But the research on just purity violations, it finds disgust, not anger.
It predominantly finds disgust, yes. Which is why we need to get past what people say they're feeling and look at what their bodies are actually doing.
Okay, that brings us to the high-tech stuff. Let's start with the face. You mentioned the U face. We're talking electromyography, EMG.
Right, EMG. It's crucial because it's objective. It measures the tiny electrical signals in your facial muscles.
So what does it show?
It shows that for both physical and moral disgust, you get activation in the levator labii.
Which is the menia.
That's the muscle that raises your upper lip and wrinkles your nose. It's that classic disgust face. Evolutionarily, it probably helped seal off your nasal passages from bad smells.
And this is important because that specific muscle is what separates it from other negative feelings.
Exactly.
But what if someone is just really, really angry, about some betrayal. Couldn't that look like disgust?
That's a great question, and it's why the levator labii is such a key marker. Anger has its own signature. The corrugator supercilii, that's the muscle that furrows your brow. You get that with anger, but you typically do not get the nose wrinkle. So when the EMG picks up strong levator labii activation, it's a pretty clear sign that disgust is in the mix, not just pure anger.
Okay, so the face shows a real measurable overlap, especially in that one muscle designed to keep contaminants out. Let's go deeper. The autonomic nervous system, heart rate, skin conductance. Does our internal chemistry tell the same story?
This is where it gets even more complex, but also more revealing, because the response isn't one size fits all.
Not even for physical disgust.
Not even for physical disgust. We see two very different patterns. The first one is for what we call core contamination disgust.
So rotten food, waste, that kind of thing.
Yes. And interestingly, for bodily-moral or purity violations as well. For both of those, you typically see a reduction in heart rate.
A reduction. It goes down. That feels totally wrong. I think any threat would make your heart race.
It's very counterintuitive. The theory is that it's part of an attentional mechanism. Sometimes it's called the rejection response.
Okay.
Your body sort of slows down to assess the threat and prepare for avoidance. It's the body saying, whoa, stop, look away, do not ingest this.
So my body treats seeing a deeply unhygienic act, which is a moral violation, the same way it treats seeing a piece of rotten meat.
In terms of this heart rate deceleration, yes, it triggers that same slow, rejection-focused state.
Wow. Okay, so what's the second pattern?
The second pattern is what you'd expect. It's an increase in heart rate, heightened arousal.
And when does that happen?
That's associated with what's called animal reminder disgust, seeing blood or an open wound, and also with socio-moral violations.
Like betrayal, injustice.
Betrayal, harm, things like that. Those tend to speed the heart up.
Okay, this is a huge insight then.
Yeah.
The body isn't just processing disgust, it's processing the type of threat. So one system deals with contamination, the core impurity stuff, and that gives you the slow heart rate. The other system deals with harm or injury.
The animal reminder and socio-moral violations.
And that one gives you the high arousal response that looks a lot more like anger or fear.
Exactly. The key takeaway is that the physiological signature of moral disgust is conditional. It really only lines up with core physical disgust when purity is involved.
When it shifts to harm or injustice, the body's response shifts too and starts borrowing from the anger and fear playbooks.
It perceives a threat that might require a fight or flight response, not just quiet avoidance.
Okay, that is a fundamental distinction. Let's go to the final frontier, the brain. What are things like fMRI telling us?
Well, we're mostly looking at a few key regions, the insula, the amygdala, and the orbitontal cortex. The insula is the big one. It's sort of the main hub.
It's activated for both types of disgust.
It is, yeah. It acts as a shared processing center for our internal bodily starts and emotions.
But just like with the heart rate, I'm guessing it's not that simple. Does the insula differentiate?
It does, and this is where the brain mapping gets so cool. We see a split within the insula itself. The anterior insula, the front part, is more strongly linked to that core disgust and the purity violations.
So the anterior insula is the don't eat that, stay away center.
You could think of it that way, yeah. Meanwhile, the posterior insula, the back part, lights up more for animal reminder disgust and for those socio-moral violations.
So it reinforces the other findings. The contamination versus threat split is literally mapped onto different parts of the insula.
It seems to be. The posterior insula is involved in a more general visceral reaction to things that are potentially dangerous.
That makes perfect sense. So what about the parts of the brain that are doing the actual judging, the moral calculation?
For that, we look to the cingulate cortex. This area helps mix our emotions with more complex thoughts, specifically the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC.
And what's its job?
The PCC is all about moral cognition, memory. It gets activated when you have to think about why something was wrong. It puts the act in context.
So it kicks in when the offense is complex and you need to pull in social rules and memories to understand it?
Yes, and then you have the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
Which does the opposite.
It's more about immediate social judgment, threat recognition. It lights up when the disgusting thing is a core or bodily moral issue, something that triggers a faster, more direct, that's wrong response, less deliberation, more immediate threat assessment.
So the context completely changes the neural pathway. I noticed the review mentioned some confusion from EEG studies about processing speed.
Yeah, the timing is a bit murky. Some studies found moral content was processed before the physical disgust, and others found the reverse.
Why the disagreement?
It probably just comes down to the study design. If you're giving someone a complex story to read, the moral brain has to get to work first to even understand the context.
But if
The physical threat signal is going to process first. It's more immediate.
Okay, let's zoom out. After looking at the face, the heart, the brain, what's the final distilled conclusion from this big review? Is moral disgust its own thing?
The clearest takeaway is that the signature for moral disgust is, well, it's conditional.
It depends.
It really depends. It only produces that unique, low heart rate, nose-wrinkling response, the one that's clearly different from anger when the moral violation is about purity, when it has a physical contamination cue.
So as soon as it shifts to harm or injustice or betrayal,
The physiological and neural responses start to look a whole lot more like anger or fear. Increased heart rate, posterior insula activation, the works.
so the disgust part of moral disgust really only uses the old contamination avoidance hardware when it's about something feeling physically impure.
That seems to be the most powerful conclusion, yes. But it's important to mention there are some big methodological challenges here.
Things that make it hard to be certain.
Right. For instance, the problem of intention. An intentional violation is judged way more harshly than an accident. A lot of studies don't control for that perfectly.
So you could be measuring a mix of disgust and a judgment about responsibility.
Exactly. And the other big challenge is, are we judging the act or the actor?
What's the difference?
Well, you can judge the act of cheating as wrong, or you can judge the person who cheated as being impure or corrupt.
And judging the person.
Judging the person as impure is a social signal. It's a way of saying, I need to distance myself from this bad character, which functionally is identical to avoiding a physical contaminant.
So it all comes back to avoidance. Whether it's avoiding literal vomit or avoiding a person you see as morally toxic, the end goal is the same.
The action tendency is the same, even if the internal chemistry shifts a bit depending on the specific threat.
So to sum it all up, there are clear, shared markers between core physical disgust and moral purity violations.
Yes, the contamination avoidance markers are very strong there. The differences we see usually pop up when socio-moral violations start to overlap with anger and fear.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on, a provocative question to take away. Given how tightly these purity violations and core disgust are linked, what if future research could actually isolate a moral judgment that is completely stripped of any physical contamination cue? A purely abstract moral wrong.
A truly pure, non-physical judgment.
Yeah. Would the feeling we call moral disgust still have a unique signature? Or would we find that without its physical roots, it's really just a form of anger after all? Is the emotion of moral disgust fundamentally inseparable from that ancient need to avoid getting sick?